kind of tag team what we learned and what we built. So, all right, quick overview of everything that we're going to talk about. We're going to do kind of a quick design reminder on the Apple Watch, kind of what you do on the watch. We're going to talk a little bit about WatchKit architecture, so how stuff works. Then we're going to get into the cool stuff and talk about building Instagram for the Apple Watch. And then we've also included a nice little surprise. We're going to be releasing a new library tonight, so we will talk about that at the end. All right, so Apple's always had this book, the Human Interface Guidelines, and when they came out with WatchKit, they released another version of that called the Apple Watch Human Interface Guidelines. And there were 3 key points. They wanted you to design apps that were personal, holistic, and lightweight. And I'm pulling this directly from the Watch Human Interface Guidelines. So what's personal? It's designed to be worn and touched. You're designing it to be both digital and physical. Remember, we've got not only the touch interfaces, but we've got taptic feedback, we've got the crown. But most importantly, your apps are supposed to be quick, they're supposed to be lightweight, and they're supposed to be very brief. You know, you're only using these apps for just like a little tiny bit of time. I think when they released the app, Apple said if people use their computers for hours, they use their phones for minutes, and they're going to use their watches for seconds. So it kind of gets you in the right mindset when you're designing apps for the watch. And that plays along with Instagram because one of our company values is to do the simple thing first. So when Apple's telling us to make really, really simple apps, well, that's kind of in our wheelhouse. So when starting with the design, I'm sure everybody's seen, you've got black backgrounds, you've got white fonts or white text, and you've got this new San Francisco font. Not to mention all these new interface elements. A little blurry up there, but you've got like an image, you've got buttons, you've got text. And this is different from what's on Instagram currently. So we had to kind of design around these new elements and these new paradigms where we've got really simple buttons, huge text, and not a whole lot of change. You're kind of keeping it pretty simple with the OS. Oh, and we also use tables. We use tables a lot. So real quick on the watch architecture, how WatchKit works. You've got 3 parts. You've got the main app. You've got your WatchKit extension. Well, your extension is what basically has your controllers, executes the code. Then you've got your WatchKit app. That's what's got your storyboards and all of your local assets. Kind of touching on app lifecycle. So you've got an event that happens. So the app starts up, or you touch something. Here we're going to touch the little heart icon. As soon as that happens, sends the event over to the phone, which executes the code. And then when the phone is done executing, sends the data back to the device, updates the UI. It's kind of itty-bitty up there, but the heart's filled in now, so you've liked something.
All right, so we're going to talk about data transfer in latency. Like Ryan explained, with the app and the extension and to communicate with Bluetooth. That leads to a few problems, especially the latency. That means that when you display content, it comes from the storyboard, which is loaded in the app, and whatever you do afterwards in the extension, usually there is a delay and comes after. So yeah. So there is one big challenge with that is that the AZK now doesn't provide any way to actually do scrolling, especially the scrolling delegates that we're used to in the main app, for instance. I mean, in UIKit, for instance, or any gesture events, because there is not that back and forth communication between the extension and the app. All right, so for Xcode in your project, if you already have an app, you add new targets. So you add your Watch app that will add the extension to Watch app targets. You have to use the storyboards. We at Instagram, we don't really use that much storyboards or nips so far, usually. So we were forced to use the storyboards here. But WatchKit forces us to use it, and there is actually no way to create any view dynamically in code, unfortunately. And the last thing is, especially for us, like we also have like a whole workflow with all the tools we use to build the app, and there are a lot of changes there as well regarding signing and building the app as well.
The other thing we kind of get used to, Arno mentioned that we don't use storyboards or nibs at all. So we do pretty much all of our layout in the main app in code. So we're just doing stuff with frames and sizes and origins. So we had to get used to this new box model idea. So the box model idea in WatchKit is basically you can size things to fit their contents. You can size things relative to their containers. If you've ever done any front-end web programming, it's pretty similar to like CSS. You've got the idea of padding. You have spacing. And this was pretty new for us, but it was actually kind of nice. If you've ever done any Android development either, it's pretty similar to how you can just size things relatively based on their contents. And on iOS, that's notoriously kind of a pain in the butt. So it was pretty nice. It was actually kind of, after we got used to it, it's kind of something that we wouldn't mind seeing ported over to iOS. One of the huge limitations for us, though, is that when you've got such a defined layout system, it limits what you can do design-wise. So we had to pay a lot of attention with like how we're overlaying designs and images and interacting and showing stuff on top of other things, or blending elements or anything like that. It's pretty much separate for the most part.
Okay, so a word on internationalization. One of the issues is, again, we're using NS localized string that, if you don't know that, it's a macro that basically lets you translate your strings. Basically, we use that extensively. Only actually, we use that in the main app, and we can't use that again in the watch. I mean, it's available, but the problem is the delay again. So here's, for instance, what will happen if you. So what happens is, if you use NS localized string, what you would have is like the storyboard gets loaded first when it's loading, and then you have like your text that's not translated, or eventually it's blank if you didn't put any text in your storyboard. And then after a delay, you can expect to have your text coming in. So that means like from the UX, it's pretty bad, because there's a period like probably, we don't know, probably like a second or so where basically you have no information. Or nothing that shows up. So one way to do this is to localize your storyboard. So there are two ways to do this. You can localize your storyboard, and the pro with that is that you can, in certain languages, especially where text can be very, very long, you can have it translated directly in the storyboard for that very specific language. The second technique is to use strings associated with a storyboard. That's what we use because it fits our tools. It really depends what you want to do. Yeah.
So Instagram's kind of notorious for using images. We use a lot of remote images. But when you've got this new sort of architecture, you don't want to be downloading images synchronously, because not only is it going to delay how long it takes to download the image, but it's also going to delay how long it takes to send it to the device and to get rid of that little spinner. So with the Instagram Watch app, we're using a combination of remote and local content, similar to how you would do it in any app, really. So with our local content, what that means is just basically like static stuff. So you've got icons, you've got resources. You want to make sure that you put all of that in your WatchKit at target. And the reason for that is that if you put images or resources in your extension and then you load them and you send them to the watch, you're actually transferring that data over the air. And it's already somewhat of a delay in data transfer. You want to keep that as small as possible. So if there's any static local images, you want to make sure they're on the WatchKit app, because the watch will load them directly. And you can do that either by putting them in the storyboard or loading them in code at WK interface image names or image with name, something like that. Oh, and make sure that you're including 38 and 42 millimeter icons. So not too much to talk about with remote images. It works pretty much the same as it does on our main app. You download remote images from our servers. We use our URL caching just the same as we normally would, and we make sure that we're doing everything asynchronously, doing fetching and image decoding. It's all pretty much exactly the same.
All right, so what can we reuse between the extension and the app that we already have? So, well, we can reuse all the data models, so that's really neat. And we can also reuse the network stack that's 100% compatible. Now, what do we have to rebuild? Well, basically, like we said, the whole interface, because everything is WK WatchKit specific. So we have to redo the design and redo all the elements that we want to reuse. So that includes like, I mean, the whole style is basically different. So we need a black background, San Francisco font, and so on. Also, what's worth noting is also like the navigation is a bit different. So you only have, you know, like the navigation controller or equivalent, where you can basically push and pop in the model view, where you can present and dismiss, and that's all you have.
So talking about user sessions, when we first approached user sessions, like the best idea that we come up with was something like this, where you would dictate your password into the watch. And I think you guys probably figure out why that's not necessarily such a good idea. Privacy and security is still an incredibly important thing. So what we're doing, which I think is actually a pretty elegant solution, we just keep login on the main app. But then what we do is we take advantage of the OS's keychain and store your session ID in the keychain. And then if you set up the proper entitlements, make sure that the bundle IDs are matching and everything, then when you go to use the watch, you're logged in. You don't have to fuss with logging in on the app. And vice versa works. If you don't have the ID working, then you can't use the app on the watch.
All right, so the watch is pretty neat. It's pretty cool. I'm sure everyone wants to have one, but the problem is it has a small screen, right? And if you want to watch like a picture or something, you probably want to pull your phone out of your pocket pretty quickly. So that's where Handoff comes in, and so Handoffs lets you actually keep. Yeah, I forgot to say, like, of course, you use your watch only for a few seconds. And so Handoff is really useful because you can keep like basically your context between when you are using your watch and when you're using it. So that means you can end up in the same screen where you were. So you just need to swipe basically on your phone, and you can end up on the same screen where you were and keep whatever content. If you were writing a post, you can have like the message that you started writing on your watch. It can be on the phone as well, or whatever other activity you were doing. Yeah, so the API for that is actually pretty simple. It's simpler than the UIKit equivalent. This is the only method that you really need to use. Update user activity, and you just give the activity name. And then you have a user info dictionary where you can put any other information, like I said, like if you were writing a comment or a caption for your post or whatever, you can put it there. Yeah. Oh, and the last thing that's really important is the Handoff is pretty neat, but it works only one way. It's only from the watch to the phone and not the other way around. All right, notifications. That's also an important topic and pretty useful for the watch. So we have like two types of notifications. We have like the static ones, where basically all you display is just basically text, and then you can make rich notifications, dynamic notifications. That's pretty neat, especially for us, because we can display images there and not just text. The way it works is the devices are supposed to know when a notification comes in, where to route the notification, and it will display on the basically the latest device that you used. Yeah. You want to
Oh yeah. So this is a screenshot. This isn't from Instagram. It's from another sample app, actually, in the book that we wrote. So on the left, you've got your static notifications, and on your right, you have the dynamic notifications. So what happens when a notification actually comes in and you've got a dynamic or custom notification wired up, you can take action. Your controller is fired up. You can do something like downloading images from a text, maybe do some sort of computation or something. But you only have a little bit of time. In Apple's documents, they call it a timely manner. So there's no actual seconds or anything like that. You just have a little while to finish fetching all of your content. And then you call this completion handler. It's like a callback to basically say that you're done. And if you don't call that callback in time, then the system just falls back and shows you the stack notification. It's actually kind of cool. So if you're on like a spotty connection or something, the notification gets displayed, just so that you've got a better connection or like circumstances just work out that you get more notification.
All right, so since the watch is really important about quick and like just quick usage, actions are very important. So the way you can do is add actions to the notifications, and for that you register in your main app. You have to register your actions and attach them to categories. It's important it's in the main app and not in the watch app. And oh yeah, one important thing is that you probably want to have some actions only on the watch and not on the phone. So normally that's not really something that's in the SDK right now, but there is actually a trick where you can actually make that happen. So one example is for the images. Maybe you want to like an image, that's fine, but if you don't see the image because you're on your phone, it doesn't make any sense. So that's one example. So one way is to use the context. So you probably know the screen from the settings in the iPhone. And so there are different contexts that correspond to, I don't know if you can read from here, but
yeah. So this is none, and this is banners, and this is alerts.
Yeah. So by default, and I guess like all the users have banners installed and not alerts because they're pretty ugly, basically. So the thing is, the banners are by default, but they are called context minimal, and that's where you need to follow. The other ones, the alerts, are actually not the default, but it's called context default. Long story short, this is the default on the iPhone, but on the watch can use actually the other one. So the default, that's not the default on the watch, on the iPhone. Anyways, so you can actually have different actions. That's a way to have different actions depending on what device you are. Yeah. So. All right.
Probably pretty hard to read, but basically this little code snippet, all it's showing you is that you're setting up a category, you set up an identifier, but notice here how you're setting actions. You've got like, reply, show. Those are just actions that were created earlier. For context, and this is action context default. So that's like the actions for the watch or the alerts. And then down here you've got just show. And then this is for the context minimal. So that's only going to show up on the phone. And again, that's just like assuming that people aren't changing between banners and alerts that often, just using the defaults. So testing on watches. So using is super difficult because you can't initialize WatchKit classes. Can't create WatchKit interface button, label, whatever, because they need to be instantiated from a storyboard, from whatever mechanism loads them from a storyboard. And then you can't create storyboards in your unit test, so it's kind of impossible to create these classes. So it's pretty tough. Basically, when you want to test for real, we're just going to have to wait until April 24th and test on real devices. All right, so anybody with WatchKit before? I'm assuming since it's an Apple Watch group, some people probably have. If you've ever used WatchKit it's got kind of a funky API where you've got set like a single-dimensional array of row identifiers, and then you got to iterate over those and do some row controller stuff and set everything up. We had to do that, and we found that kind of a pain. So we're excited that we're going to be releasing our project called IGInterfaceDataTable. And basically, this just makes taking complex data structures and mapping them into WK interface table a whole heck of a lot easier. It uses an API that's really similar to UI table views data source. So if you've ever done iOS stuff, it's probably super familiar. This is going to be impossible to read, but on the left you've got a dictionary with some arrays, or dictionaries and arrays, data. In the middle, what IGInterfaceDataTable does is it maps your data into row controllers. So you can have table headers, section headers, and then just rows. And then on the right, it just turns that into your watch app. So the API is pretty similar. You've got, similar to UI table view data source, you've got a number of rows in table. Row identifier and index path is what you return. Basically, is the row identifier that you've established in your storyboards. So that's like what your row controllers are. You've got convenience methods. So if you need to configure something, if you've got dynamic rows where you need to like list certain types of data, to-do list or something. And then even event handling. So did select row at index. Unfortunately, can't override that, so we provide mappers so you can take the index of a row in your table and turn that into an index path, so it's easy to figure out what piece of data was tagged. Oh, and we've got editing support as well. This is all a category on WK interface table, so it's not like you have to do a whole bunch. So just a tiny demo of how this works with massive font. Whew. Okay, so this is just a simple demo. So like this is like a table header and a section header, and then some rows and a bunch of other stuff, and then a table footer. But what's cool is that is all powered by this data in here. And instead of having to configure a whole bunch of stuff, well, I can actually scroll down and show you. For the rows, it's just self data counts, items count. Pretty simple, similar API to table views. And if I wanted to make a quick, easy change, instead of having to do some weird mapping with the keys of my dictionaries and all sorts of stuff, I can just blast that. And then, fingers crossed, let down it works. And then I don't have that section at the bottom. Or if I wanted to, let's say, get rid of my section headers. Cool. They're still in sections, but they look like a single table. The nice thing is that makes interacting with WK interface table just a whole heck of a lot easier. So we're going to be releasing it on GitHub sometime early next week. And we'd love any comments. Pretty small project, but we'd love any comments or hear about what you build with it. That's about it. So if you guys have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Yeah.
How many megabytes is the application the watch?
How many megabytes?
If you can repeat the question.
How many megabytes is the watch application? That's a good question. I have no idea.
Wait. So wait, sorry, can you...
Like the size of the watch?
Just the watch app?
Yeah.
I think it's about a meg or
okay.
2. Yeah, it's not so big.
And the Instagram app in comparison is?
8, 9.
I think in the App Store right now it's somewhere around 9 or 10. Yeah.
One thing is Apple requires us to have... So until now we're having only the ARM v7 architecture. And so now Apple is requiring us, I mean, every developer and every app to be like ARM 64 as well. So it's going to probably double. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about how you're optimizing for bandwidth? Like how many pictures are you loading, and are you doing super high compression? Do you have an animation before it loads a picture?
So yes, we are optimizing. Details, I'm not too familiar with the exact details, but yeah, I mean, it's different API endpoints so that we're not loading as much content. We want the watch to be like a much shorter experience, so we don't, like, you don't need to have like an infinite scroll or anything on the watch. Yeah?
2 questions. Your new table stuff, is it, do you have it in Objective-C or do you have it in Swift?
Good question. It is only in Objective-C, And I'm going to guess if your next question would be, did we write the app in Swift or Objective-C?
Yes.
Okay. So we stuck with Objective-C because, for the most part, the Swift tools are still maturing, and they're going to be awesome when they're like fully ready. But internally at Facebook, I mean, everything that we use is in Objective-C. It works really, really, really well. That's what we all know really, really, really well. So that's just what we stuck with. And the open source project is in Objective-C just so that it's compatible because other people are probably in the same situation as us. And we would rather Swift interop with our Objective-C library than have to figure out how Objective-C people need to interop with our Swift. Yeah?
I did find that when you transfer images to the watch to time out, what do you find would be like the appropriate size of images to send?
Do we ever have to deal with timeout images or image timeouts when loading remote images? No. No. I don't think that we've really had much of a problem with that. No.
You never had like downloads.
Well, the image resolutions are different.
Yeah, right. So all the images for the watch are specifically for the watch. So 320 pixels. So it's not the same images that we use. I mean, it's the same images but different sizes than for the main app, basically.
How many kilobytes?
Oh, I have no idea.
It's like tens.
Yeah.
We hold different resources for the different Apple Watches, or?
No, for the moment
no,
it's the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't really understand the part where you spoke about the keychain and passing the token to the Apple Watch app. Can you go over it again?
Yeah. So the question was about how you've got your main app and your watch app and how you can use the keychain to do user sessions, and basically sharing data. You want to touch on that?
Yeah, so basically the nice thing with keychains is that you don't really have much to do. You just say like, I want to use a shared keychain between my extension and my main app, and that's it. If you want to share data in other ways, you need to use an app group. We don't use that for the moment. We don't really have a use for that. Maybe for cache later, but since the images are different, I don't know. Yeah, we sort like the session, the cursor session as soon as you log in on the main app. We store it in the keychain, and on the watch app, like we check when you look at the watch app, we check if you're logged in or not, and if you are, then you can use the app, and we know what session to use.
Do you guys put like a please log in message?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The nice thing with that is that, like, remember, since the phone, when you're using the watch app, the extension is on the phone, and that's what's executing the code. So it's not like you're having to deal with any weird syncing or like race conditions with like keeping the keychain in sync between the watch and the phone. Because when you save it on the main app to the keychain, if the watch immediately accesses it, well, it's right there. It's still on the same physical device. So it's actually pretty simple and it's pretty convenient.
Okay, what did the experience in talking with expire while I'm using the watch?
Yeah.
Can you repeat what you said?
So you're saying, were you asking if the session would expire if you're using the watch and the session or would your watch session expire if you were using the app and the session ID expired? Or your token expired?
So for you were talking about you have like your network connection codes and then watch connection, also the app, and if so, are you sharing the code between the two, or you put it into a framework, or what do you do?
We use a framework.
Yeah, we have a framework, static library. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the exact same code. Nothing fancy. Yeah.
do you know how much local storage per app you can on the watch?
It's a good question. So the question is how much local storage? Like you're talking about like the shared data stuff?
Well, like preloading resources, basically, like stuff that you want to preload without having to ask for it from the extension, like maybe images and things like that that you want to build for the UI.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have no idea.
No.
20 megabytes.
20 megabytes?
It's a guideline at the moment.
And that, to be honest, that's a lot.
Well, I think that's including your image resources for things like animation and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm not 100% sure, but that's just kind of the number I've heard bandied about.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Did you do instrumentation in WatchKit?
I don't think the tools are there for it. What was the question? Doing instruments, like profiling?
Like Ferrari and Taylor.
Oh, like analytics. We're using our own analytics stuff.
Yeah.
Like we always done.
Or we do it in the extension part, or like transfer to the parent app.
They each, the main app and like the watch have their own logging stuff. It's the same system, but they're totally unique events and everything. Yeah.
So based on that, it's my understanding the extension doesn't have any background processing, so if the watch app isn't active, the extension dies. So the analytics wouldn't get uploaded until the app will start to begin. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So for allowing you to have background processes or
I don't think you can have background processes on the watch. If you needed to do that, I would probably say, your extension saves stuff to the shared app folder, and then the main app schedules for some sort of background task on either an interval or before the app shuts down or something, and then it can take the data out of that shared app and then do something with it.
There is one method you can use to where the extension can actually call the main app. It's called I can't remember the name exactly.
Open parents.
Parent app or something like that. Yeah. So you can eventually do that, and Apple actually recommends doing that if you have like long-running tasks. You can call the main app to do whatever it needs to.
So one thing I wanted to show real quick was show the app working. Yeah, so there we go. You can see it in action.
Is this a table?
Yeah.
how is this to click on this feed on the top? Is it easy to click like the feed?
That button. This
The
button.
back button, yeah.
It's not
I think it's fine. I mean, you can tap on it, but I think most people probably actually you can swipe it, just like on iOS. That's probably a lot easier.
Any thoughts on the design? Why we need a different pressure touch to show options instead of going to the details page?
Probably just keeping it simple.
Yeah, we do have, so you're talking about the menu, interactive menu somewhere. We use that somewhere in the app for instance, when you write a comment and you want to just erase it. It's an easy way to show like backspace basically and erase whatever you're doing. If you go to in the profile, you can also like follow or unfollow someone from there.
Yeah. Doing anything with the crown since you can't run it in the simulator?
Not really.
Okay.
That all does is scroll, right?
Yeah.
Or apps.
Yeah, and I think there might be. I thought they demoed. There's a button next to it or something. I don't know if you can tap the button or the crown too. It'd be kind of cool.
It selects things that tap on to.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll look at it. say, to develop our application?
Sorry, it's about just a week and a half. Yeah, it's pretty simple because that's one of the things that are really awesome about this SDK is that it's super simple. It feels almost like a reboot of everything we know in UIKit, even though it feels a bit frustrating sometimes because we're missing some things that we're used to. But it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And then was there a designer? I know that you're supposed to a designer assignment.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we're not that talented. Yeah.
So just to clarify, you're getting the images from Instagram on the phone, right? Getting an API on the phone, presume?
You're talking about the main app?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those images are going to the watch? Yeah.
No.
Does the watch load the images itself?
Well, the watch, the extension, which is run on the phone, fires the network request, which goes out, fetches the data, and when that's done, sends the data to the watch, and then it shows up on the display. So yes and no. I mean, using the watch app is what triggers that request to fire. It's not like the main app sitting there and there's some run loop.
And I noticed you're scrolling through the pictures, so you're loading more than one picture on the watch there.
Yeah, because you don't get any scrolling events, so you can't get like an event that's like, oh, I reached the end of the table, or I brought some new row controller on the screen. So you have to pretty much queue up everything. You want to be smart about it, like you're queuing the images that you're going to see first. So you want those to download first. But if you're loading like 10 items in a row, you got to fire off all 10 image requests. It's sort of just like a limitation of the SDK right now.
How did you guys decide how many images to load at a time? Was it like a UX decision where you looked at how far people usually scroll down on their phone, or was it more of like based on technical, like the speed?
Yeah, there is a technical limitation. If you load like too many images, it will. I mean, all those images have eventually to be downloaded by the extension and then sent to the watch itself. So that's going to take a while, of course. If you download like 100 images, it's going to take like hours. I mean, not hours, but minutes. And since you're only using it for like seconds, like we don't want that. So we keep like the feed like pretty small in general. And our bet is that, anyways, like I said, like a user is gonna use the app only for a few seconds. And we believe that if you really want to scroll and see your whole feed, you can use a handoff and pull your phone. That's it. Yeah.
Another question: are you downloading a low resolution image from the net? So you couldn't use that on the phone. You presumably have to.
So yeah, so the resolution is different. So we have a resolution specifically for the watch. Yes.
You make the call for a low resolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once done with the target caching, if it's showing up, like for example, you download some images and we start the watch app, and that image is then complete. Are you using that image or not?
Yeah. So questions. Basically, are we caching images that we're downloading remotely? And yeah, we're using the same URL caching that we would use elsewhere. So it works exactly the same. Cool.
On the app run on the phone, how do you actually share the business logic between the Apple Watch extension and the main app? Do you actually have another separate library in your case, or are you just competing against each libraries? Or?
It's just excuse me. It's just Xcode workspaces, and then you can have different projects within the workspace.
But are those projects like libraries themselves, or are you just?
We think libraries.
Yeah.
So the network stack is library, and we reuse it, and models we share only what we need at this stage, simply by having them in the true targets. Yeah.
Have you tested the lab yet?
Can't comment on that. So yes. Cool. Thanks a lot, guys. Awesome.